how to make an avoidant feel you in their soul and crave your energy. You know that person who pulls you in with a glance, then disappears like smoke? They're charming, mysterious, addictive, and avoidant. But here's the truth. If you want to reach someone with an avoidant attachment style, not just touch their heart, but etch your presence into their soul, you can't play their game. You have to change the whole arena. They don't fall for chaos. They fall for what makes them feel safe to be seen. So how do you do that? Let's dive in. Avoidants often pull away, not because they don't care, but because closeness feels overwhelming. To them, emotional intimacy can trigger fears of losing autonomy or being engulfed. So when you react to their distance with panic, chasing, or emotional overdrive, it confirms their fear that closeness means pressure. What they don't expect, and what disarms them completely, is someone who stays emotionally centered, unshaken by their distance. When you master emotional self-control, you become the one person in their life who doesn't add chaos, but actually neutralizes it. That kind of presence is magnetic. Emotional self-control isn't about being cold or detached. It's about regulating your reactions, not making them responsible for your anxiety. When they pull away, your instinct might be to text more, ask where things are going, or push for connection. But what if, instead, you allowed space with quiet confidence? What if you let them feel their own emotions rather than flood them with yours? That's when they start to notice you're different. You're not just another person who needs something from them. You're someone who can stand in your own energy. Being emotionally self-contained sends a subtle but powerful message. You don't have to rescue me from my feelings because I'm already grounded in them. This is incredibly attractive to an avoidant because deep down, they're scared of not being able to handle someone else's emotional needs. When you show them that your emotions are yours to manage, they relax. And in that relaxation, they become more open to connection. There's also something undeniably sexy about composure. Think about the people who leave a lasting impression. They aren't the ones who were loud or demanding. They're the ones who made you feel calm just by being near them. That's the effect emotional self-control has on someone avoidant. It lets them feel safe with you, even when they're struggling to feel safe in themselves. You become the emotional anchor they didn't know they were searching for. Every time you choose presence over panic and confidence over control, you teach them that closeness doesn't have to cost freedom, that being seen doesn't mean being smothered. And slowly, without even realizing it, they begin to lean in, not because you chase them, but because your energy invites them. Not out of obligation, but out of desire. Because what they once feared now feels like peace. When you're dealing with someone avoidant, the moment you start trying to lock them down with definitions, ultimatums, or emotionally loaded questions, you're stepping into territory that makes them retreat. Their defense mechanism isn't anger, it's distance. What they respond to is space, but not the cold, punishing kind. They need emotional space, where they don't feel cornered, where connection is allowed to unfold instead of being demanded. That's where curiosity becomes your most powerful tool. It shifts the dynamic from what are we to what's going on in you that I'd like to understand. Curiosity allows you to lean into the relationship without gripping it. Instead of pressuring them to label what you are or rushing them into emotional declarations, you express genuine interest in who they are without needing to tie it to a future outcome. This is how you bypass their walls. You might say something like, I noticed you seem quieter after we get close. Do you feel that too? That's not an accusation. It's not a demand. It's a mirror. Clean, simple, and non-judgmental. It gives them room to share rather than defend. Avoidants often don't understand their own reactions. When you pressure them for clarity, why haven't you called? Where is this going? You're asking for answers they may not even have. That doesn't just stress them out, it confirms their belief that closeness equals responsibility and pressure. But if instead you stay curious, they begin to experience you as someone who wants to understand them, not control them. And that's rare. There's also a difference between emotional intensity and emotional presence. Avoidants feel threatened by intensity because it usually comes with expectation. But emotional presence, your ability to stay connected, attentive, and open without needing to direct the conversation toward outcomes, feels safe. It makes them want to open up without being asked. When you remove the pressure to define, you give the connection room to breathe. And in that breathing room, something surprising happens. The avoidant begins to seek more of you. The irony is that the more curious and relaxed you are, the more likely they are to give you the very clarity you were hoping for, because your energy says, I'm here to connect, not control. That energy doesn't chase, it draws in, it invites, and that invitation feels nothing like fear, it feels like freedom. And freedom, to an avoidant, is the first step toward trust. Avoidants often move through the world with their guard up, not because they don't feel deeply, but because they've learnt to hide those feelings as a way to protect themselves. They're not numb, they're armored. They've developed a sharp intuition about when someone wants to get close just to take, fix, or expose them. So the moment they feel like you're trying to force intimacy, they shut down. The key isn't to push past their walls, it's to reflect their inner world in a way that makes them want to let you in. Being a mirror doesn't mean imitating them or pretending to understand. It means truly noticing. Most people respond to what an avoidant says on the surface, but someone who feels them deeply pays attention to what goes unspoken. They see the subtle shifts in tone, the way they go quiet when something touches a nerve, the way their body language changes when vulnerability comes too close. You earn their trust, not by prying, but by showing that you're attuned enough to pick up what they don't always know how to express. You can say something simple like, I notice you get really thoughtful when you talk about your family. Or it seems like you get quiet when things feel a little intense. Does that feel true for you? These observations, when spoken gently and without pressure, can feel like lightning in their chest because suddenly someone sees what they usually keep hidden, not to expose it, but to honor it. And that kind of seeing is rare. It's intimate without being invasive. Avoidants don't want someone who barges in and tries to fix them. They want someone who sits beside them and says, I see you. When you show that you recognize their complexity without needing to dissect it, you become a presence that feels both safe and stimulating. You're not trying to force depth, you're reflecting it. And because of that, they begin to associate your presence with being known rather than being judged. When someone feels deeply seen by you, they can't forget that feeling. You become tied to a part of themselves they rarely share. And because you've tapped into something real, they begin to crave your presence, not just your company, but your perception. The way you notice them makes them feel real, valued, and safe. That's when their guard begins to soften. That's when you move from someone they spend time with to someone they feel in their soul. Avoidants are hyper-attuned to any signs that someone is trying to get too close, too fast. Overgiving, whether it's constant texting, doing emotional labor for both of you, or pouring your feelings out in hopes of getting a reaction, can make them feel suffocated. They don't read it as love, they read it as pressure. But that doesn't mean you need to be cold or distant. In fact, avoidants often respond powerfully to warmth. What makes the difference is that the warmth isn't trying to convince them to open up, it just is. It's calm, inviting, consistent, and balanced by your own boundaries. When you radiate a kind of quiet self-assurance, your energy doesn't chase, it attracts. You can be emotionally available without handing over all your power. You can care deeply without turning yourself into a lifeline for someone else's comfort. That balance is what creates emotional gravity. It pulls them in because it feels safe and intriguing. You're showing up with love, but not self-abandonment. That's rare. and it makes you unforgettable. Showing consistent warmth means you respond with kindness, presence, and empathy, but you don't overextend. If they go quiet for a day, you don't rush in with a flood of anxious messages. You let them have their space, but you don't punish them for needing it. You just remain steady. That steadiness signals emotional maturity. And avoidants, who often fear emotional chaos, find themselves drawn to it, even if they can't name why. At the same time, you don't chase connection, you invite it. You make it clear through your behavior that while you're open to closeness, you're not dependent on it. You know your worth. You know your energy is a gift, not a tool to win them over. That shift in energy is subtle, but it's magnetic. When someone senses that you don't need them to validate your emotions or complete you, it gives them space to choose you freely. And nothing is more attractive to an avoidant than the feeling that closeness is a choice, not an obligation. This balance, consistent warmth without overgiving, builds tension in the best way. It makes your presence feel like a slow burn instead of an emotional flood. You're not demanding their attention, but your energy lingers. They start to wonder about you, think about you, miss you, because you weren't trying to overwhelm them. You were simply being real, steady, and open in a way that made them feel safe enough to want more. One of the most powerful positions you can hold with an avoidant is the willingness to walk away, not out of bitterness or to manipulate, but from a place of deep self-respect. Avoidants often operate in relationships with the subconscious belief that intimacy will cost them their independence. They protect themselves by staying one step removed, keeping their emotional distance as a form of control. What disrupts that pattern isn't begging for closeness. It's standing calmly in your value and showing them without words that your life isn't dependent on their presence. When you're willing to walk away with grace, you show that you're not emotionally tethered to inconsistency. You don't punish, you don't chase, you simply make peace with the space they've created and step back into your own. That kind of energy is rare and unforgettable. Most people react to emotional withdrawal with either protest or self-abandonment, but you respond with clarity. This isn't the connection I'm looking for, and I don't need to prove anything to be chosen. That message is felt, not spoken. And for someone who's used to being pursued or pressured, it lands like a jolt. The truth is, an avoidance might not truly begin to value your presence until they feel the weight of your absence, not because you're playing games, but because you're honoring your standards. You're not abandoning them, you're refusing to abandon yourself. That quiet strength flips the script. Suddenly, you're not the one anxiously waiting, you're the one they're thinking about, wondering about, missing. Because you didn't just disappear, you walked away with dignity. That kind of departure leaves an imprint. Avoidants often need emotional contrast to understand what they're feeling. When you remain available, no matter how inconsistent they are, there's no contrast. There's no moment of realization. But when your energy shifts, when you stop trying to hold the connection together and simply return to your center, they start to feel what they've lost. Your absence creates a mirror. And if there was real connection, that mirror can awaken something in them. It doesn't guarantee change, but it creates the space for reflection. Your ability to walk away with grace isn't about teaching them a lesson. It's about standing for your emotional health. It's saying, I want a relationship that feels mutual, not one where I constantly have to earn someone's effort. That kind of energy is powerful, and sometimes it's the very energy that draws the avoidant back, not because you chased them, but because you showed them what it means to choose yourself. And here's the truth that ties it all together. You don't get into the soul of an avoidant by pushing your way in. You do it by becoming a presence that feels different, not chaotic, not demanding, not full of need, but rooted, calm, and self-respecting. You become someone they crave, not because you try to fix them or save them or chase them, but because your energy invites them into a kind of connection they didn't even know they were starving for. You make them feel safe without smothering. You reflect their truth without exposing. You give without overextending. You hold space without losing yourself. And the moment they realize that you see them without pressure, without panic, without trying to control the outcome, is the moment you begin to live in their mind and in their heart. Because connection, real connection, isn't forced. It's earned through presence. It's built through the quiet confidence of knowing that your energy is a gift, not something to give away cheaply, just to be noticed. So remember, you don't win love by shrinking. You attract it by expanding, gracefully, unapologetically, and with a sense of self so powerful that even the most guarded soul can't help but lean in. Thank you for sharing this space with me today. Whether you're in this dynamic now, healing from it, or just learning what it means to connect more deeply with others, you deserve a love that meets you, not one that runs from you. Until next time, honor your energy, protect your peace, and never forget, the right person won't fear your depth, they'll hunger for it. Thank you, stay grounded, stay real, and I'll see you soon.